Hello, Alexandra here. This content is for folks interested in spiral dynamics or integral, and today's topic is dancing with beige. And beige is the spiral dynamics stage that represents basic survival needs. So this applies when we have chronic health conditions, when we're exhausted, when we have chronic exhaustion, when we have maybe a mystery illness that affects our lives, when we have hormonal changes or hormonal issues, or even conditions like eczema, which I learned can be very, very difficult and affect people's lives, to where on all of these, where we have to plan around these situations, when we may be exploring eating in a whole new way, we may be going to a holistic health coach, we may be going and trying new things like acupuncture, especially when we start getting into stage green, because stage green is really the first stage that's all about holistic health. I have a friend who's seeing a medical intuitive, and so when we are dancing with beige, we can be dealing with a difficult and exhausting and challenging situation that may be long term, there may be flare-ups, but as you know, when we come into acceptance and when we learn how to accept that sometimes we are going to be dancing with beige, sometimes all day, then we can be more solution focused, and we are no longer pushing through things, which we often do at stage orange. We often push the body at stage orange, but as we move into stage green and later stages, we start to listen to, be sensitive to the body wisdom, including the amount of energy we have, and we start to dance and honor and look for solutions to these basic survival needs. And we may even be planning and using a calendar and using pacing on a daily or weekly basis. We may be on a long-term and continuous journey because there is a pronounced impact on our lives. Our lives are interrupted, and maybe many areas of our lives are affected. And when we're in these flare-ups or in these challenges, we may even fall out of well-being. We may normally have a baseline of presence or well-being or feeling, maybe even in the background, sort of something larger moving through us. But when we crash out of that and experience sickness or exhaustion or health challenges, that is also a challenge. And so how do we dance with beige instead of feeling helpless, instead of feeling constantly frustrated? One great way is to begin to use the stages as a tool for finding deeper meaning in life. When we are not dependent, or a little bit less dependent, on the outcome, while we may continue to constantly search for solutions, we can still simultaneously be less dependent on the outcome and find a larger purpose and a larger meaning to maintain fulfillment. So, for example, at green, we're now experiencing empathy. We're now in a reciprocity stage where we want to have intimate discussions and discussions about spiritual topics or discussions about esoteric topics. We are inner focused and we start to work on ourselves. And if we are perhaps very challenged with our health, we might be largely staying at home. So phone calls are quite an intimate activity, and it's harder to maintain the superficial on a phone call because there's just nothing there but each other's voices, and it's definitely more intimate than, say, a group Zoom meeting. I know several people who use Zoom as a way to connect with their friends, but a one-to-one phone call is a great way to cultivate and maintain intimacy. One-to-one Zoom meetings or very small Zoom meetings with our friends, if we are in stage green, I'm talking about that need for reciprocity, that need for deep conversation, that need for intimacy. So we find our own way of deepening into stage green if we are at stage green. And as we move into stage yellow or teal, we can really start to leverage our meta systems. We may be exploring holistic health, but we may take it to the nth degree and have explored a breadth and a depth of systems, and we may be starting to come up with solutions that we never thought we could find. And so the journey can become very, very exciting, as stage yellow is a very action-oriented and intellectual stage, and very good at research and very good at being grand champions of exploring and eventually putting together these metasystems or systems of systems. So as I've mentioned in previous videos, I have a friend who has a Western medicine doctor, a homeopath, an acupuncturist, an herbalist, and a medical intuitive. So we eventually can dance with beige, accepting that beige is part of our lives. And the more we accept that we are going to dance with beige and find satisfaction and connection with others and really believe in the small wins. That's what stage teal is really good at, or stage yellow and spiral dynamics. They may be on a long, long journey in holistic health trying to find a solution that matches their needs, but we can celebrate those little wins, those small improvements, and even tiny gains. So we learn to find immense amounts of gratitude in the smallness of things. And we all have the things that bring us gratitude. Sunlight coming through the window, a quiet day where we can journal, and gratitude in our lives for someone we love, or perhaps a pet, or perhaps maybe with a chronic health challenge we don't go outside a lot, but perhaps just sitting on the back porch for a little bit and appreciating nature. So as we move into turquoise, turquoise is starting to feel palpably and kinesthetically a larger awareness coming through, and this awareness kind of holds us, and sometimes this conscious awareness that's coming through us increases our well-being so much that we don't so much feel the stressors that we were feeling around these basic survival needs. However, we can still crash out of that when we're sick, or when perhaps we're triggered, or when a part of us is reactive. I'm talking about parts work and IFS and things like brain spotting and EDMR. So we can place a wonderful and profound value on inner work and maybe start working on ourselves in a deep way. And we can find ways around having to be in control of the outcome of needing to be better right away, or perhaps even needing to be better at all, because sometimes these challenges are going to be flare-ups long-term, or they're going to be long-term challenges, and we can find ways to improve, and we can keep hope, and we can keep going. But when we start to embrace the gifts of each stage, we can find something larger than ourselves. So for example, at teal or yellow in spiral dynamics, we might just do the next right thing. That's a very teal phrase, the next right thing, or just one small thing. And again, if we look at the subjectivity of how difficult this health challenge is, we can also feel like grand champions when we've done just one small thing. And we may, on a bad day, it may be just be getting out of bed because we're so exhausted, or we don't feel well, or there are maybe some mood swings or shifts because of the health issue. But we can still do the next right thing. Sometimes the next right thing is to do the dishes. And when we celebrate these small wins, the micro wins, and we just take things step by step, we are in gratitude, and we have let go of what society thinks we should do or should be or how we should live, and we can set the parameters on what we think success is. And that may look very, very different than what society thinks. And when we work on our parts therapy, IFS, internal family systems, we might be confronting subtle introjects or almost these sub-personas in us that were sort of interjected into us in childhood. Like, quote, I have to control this, or maybe some self-blame, or maybe some helplessness, or maybe some victimhood. We tend, after we get to stage teal, we tend to feel less like victims, and we're more about, as I said, doing the next right thing, and even feeling like grand champions, even with small wins. Stage green has to be careful. It's such a sensitive stage, but they can also feel like victims, because a lot of times these long-term health challenges, people don't really understand them. They might be mystery illness or illness that's not very understood, or people simply just don't understand you because they haven't been through it themselves. I have a friend with sort of a mystery illness, and many times over the years, family members have said, oh, you don't have that. Oh, that's all in your head. And so now we're also dealing with, call it people problems. People we love might not be very supportive. And so we may wish to look within ourselves at a spiritual solution, our meditation, our contemplation, our journaling, reaching out for professional help, reaching out for support groups, but also leveraging the gifts and the beauty of the stages. And when we really start to study the stages and look at how deep they are and how rich they are, we can be amazed at the unfolding of human development, and that we are truly part of that process, and we can leverage the deep and rich gifts that each stage brings. I hope you found this content useful. Sending you love and blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.